Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting webinar lined up for you today. But before we get started, I want to introduce the GF Ideas community. Over the last 3 years, the GF Ideas India community has grown to become the go-to networking group for the smart protein ecosystem with almost 1,000 members. We are a group of entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, industry professionals, and students working collectively to accelerate the smart protein sector in India, and by networking and forming meaningful partnerships and building ventures. I am Hussain Kuradwala, and I support the Market and Consumer Insights team at GFI India. Our team conducts quantitative and qualitative consumer research for the alternative protein sector. We answer questions such as identifying the specific target market, behavior, habits, and attitudes of those consumers in the target market, and providing recommendations for go-to-market strategy and best practices. Our host today is my colleague and our team's Market and Consumer Insight Specialist, Rajyalakshmi, who has over 15 years of experience working in strategy, business, insights, and analytics for stalwart consumer brands, including Unilever, AC Nielsen, and McDonald's, among others. So I also want to highlight some of the resources that we've published and some of which are upcoming. So the resources that we've published on our website include quantitative studies on plant-based meat and dairy. And some of our upcoming resources include the product rollout guides for entrepreneurs that today's webinar is based on, and that you will have early access to sent directly to your inbox. And this will be available to you by mid-July. We will also be releasing a quantitative study on plant-based eggs in the next couple of months, among other work that we are doing. I'll now hand over to Raji to conduct the session.
Thank you, Hussain. Good evening, everyone. Hussain, can you give me the control, please, slides? Hussain, can you hear? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So as Hussain has already introduced me, so I'm not getting into that. I'm Raji and I'm the Consumer Insight Specialist with GFI India. So in one of the earlier webinars, what we've seen is how to position marketing and positioning for plant-based meats. So in today's webinar, we're going to focus mostly on the product development. So let's get started. So this is an interesting stat that I found from Harvard Business School. On an average, about 30,000 new products are launched every year, and then almost 94% of them tend to fail. So this showcases the importance of product development, right from the planning to executing each and every step, which starts with identifying the right consumers, identifying what are the need states for using a particular product, developing the product, and then later like communicating it, and then also like regularly tracking the product to do any changes that happens in accordance to the changes that are happening in the market. So today we'll be focusing on most of those aspects of product. And then once we develop the product also, so it's a process that keeps happening because the market keeps changing at every like couple of years or 3 years, depending on the category. Therefore, we'll have to continuously keep changing the product also, and also keep learning from how the product is performing in the market. So if we quickly look at what are the key steps in developing a product, the first one and the most important thing is identifying who is the target audience for the product. So once we identify the right target audience, then it is important to understand the consumers in that target group. So what are their habits? What are their attitudes? How do they use products in that consumer segment today? So once we understand that, then we move to the next step where we start developing the products, the actual development of product. And once the product is ready, so it's also equally important for us to test and learn how the product is faring with the consumers. It could be through product tests. It could be through like a market test or a pilot that we do in the market. So with all these things, we will have to ensure that we have a product that will fare well in the market space. So So once we launch the product, so then it's not that the job is done. Even after we launch the product, so there could be so many things that keep changing. Like maybe the product is not able to meet the consumer expectations. So therefore, we might have to go back to the drawing board and then make some changes in the product. Or maybe there are cost pressures internally, and therefore we might have to optimize the product to be able to meet the targets on gross margins, or like to be able to meet the P&L targets. Also, maybe there could be like different set of products that are coming into the market in terms of competition, and our product might not be faring well vis-a-vis the competition products. So it's a continuous process where we are evaluating the product that is in the market even after the launch, and do the steps that are necessary so that the product keeps retaining the consumers that it already has and also attracts new consumers. So first, getting into the first and the main core step, which is like identifying the right target audience. So as we all know, so there are so many myths about India where we say India is a vegetarian country. However, when we look at the stats that are coming, so mostly we know that almost 77% of the Indians self-identify them as non-vegetarians. So while there are some discrepancies in terms of like age, gender, income groups, but these numbers are not like very, very different from the 77% that we are seeing. And this number has been going up from the last few surveys. This is the data from the National Family Health Survey. So the numbers were 74% in 2015 and the 77% in 2019. So while a lot of population eats non-veg, what is the frequency at which they eat this food? So typically in the developed countries like the US or even like UK, most of these markets, non-veg is consumed almost on a daily basis. However, in India, though 77% of the population eats non-veg, only about 6% of women and about 8% of men consume these products on a daily basis. So majority of the population, which is almost like close to 40 to 50% of the population, consumes it still on a weekly basis. And there is 1 in 4 who consumes almost like once in a while, which is an occasional consumption. So as a result of this, when we look at the per capita consumption in India, which stands around 3.7 kilos, this does not include fish, but still this 3.7 kilos for the entire meat is still one of the lowest in the world. So when we look at it in comparison with countries like China, so whose per capita consumption is around 45 kilos. Or when we compare it with that market like US, whose per capita consumption is almost 100 kilos per annum. So India is typically, though we have like majority of the population consuming non-vegetarian, because of our low frequency of consumption, our per capita consumption is pretty low. However, what we know also from looking at the adjacent markets like China, with the increase in affluence, the increase in meat consumption goes up. So this red graph that we are seeing, this is the increase in meat consumption in China between 1980 and 2010, which has seen such a steep increase along with the increase in their GDP. So we also know that in India, along with the affluence that we are seeing, in the last 20 years, we had also seen an increase in per capita, so which was around 3 kilos per annum around 2000, which also has gone up to 3.7 kilos per annum in 2021. And this is projected to further increase by 2030. So one of the key factors that's contributing to this is affluence. And there is also aspiration to consume more meat. So however, with the kind of increase in population that we are seeing globally, and also with India hosting like almost the second most populous country in the world, so there is going to be a lot of pressure on the food systems to be able to produce the kind of quantities that we require as a country to consume. So therefore, somewhere there is a need to build these food systems which are like resilient, which are also sustainable and safe. So that's where we are talking about the alternative proteins, which are at different stages of development in different countries. While the markets like US and Europe, which are like slightly ahead of us, in India, pretty much the market is in an early adopter stage. So who are these early adopters? So early adopters are the people who are the first ones, or like who are very comfortable with any new innovation. And these are the ones who first try these innovations. So since in India, plant-based space is typically targeting these early adopters, let's see who are these early adopters and what is their profile looks like. So how did we go about identifying the profile of these early adopters? So like we've mentioned, so these are the consumers who are the first ones to try any new categories. So therefore, once you try the category, when do you call someone a user? So from the trial, when they move to buying a particular category on a regular basis. And also, as we all know that the sector being new, most of the price points are at a premium compared to the traditional meat products. Therefore, early adopter is someone who is highly likely to regularly purchase this category and also who is willing to pay a little more premium in the initial stages. So using those two parameters, we try to identify the profile. So when we look at these graphs, so the audience in the age group of 25 to 44 have higher tendency, they are more willing to pay a price premium and they are also likely to purchase these categories at a regular intervals. And similarly, the audience who are well educated, who has a bachelor degree or higher, and whose incomes are like better than the average income in India. So whose monthly household incomes are almost like 50,000 plus, and mostly people living in the urban cities. Also, when we look at their eating patterns, so non-vegetarians are more likely to try these products on a regular basis and are also more likely to pay a price premium compared to the vegetarians or the vegans in the country. Also, since we have identified that non-vegetarians are the primary target audience in early adopters, and these non-vegetarians are also not the ones who are consuming meat, maybe say at the frequency that we've seen earlier, which is like once a week or occasionally. But these guys are really high in terms of like their meat eating frequency. So like most of them consume meat almost like 8+ times in a week, which is pretty much saying that they have one meal every day with meat. So summarizing the target audience, so the target audience or the early adopters for plant-based segment is audience who are young in the age group of 25 to 44, who are well educated, who has a monthly household income of at least 50,000 plus, who are living in the large cities or towns, and who are omnivores, and then whose meat eating frequency is much higher compared to the average Indian, which is almost like 8+ times in a week. So this is the target profile that we have to keep in mind every time we are thinking of product development or anything related to the plant-based space. So now that we know who's the target audience, let's quickly understand what are their like eating habits in terms of the traditional meat products. So dairy and eggs is something which is consumed by pretty much everybody in the country, which includes both vegetarians and non-vegetarians. So again, among the early adopters, dairy has the highest penetration, which is almost like 80% of them consuming dairy products in the last 1 week, and similar penetration numbers for eggs as well. So among the meat products, as we all know, poultry is the leader. So almost 3/4 of early adopters have consumed chicken in the last 1 week. The penetration for poultry is closely followed by fish, which is around 63%. And the next one is mutton, which is at around 48%. So the other meat items like shellfish, beef, and pork have relatively lower penetration compared to poultry and fish. So as we've discussed in the earlier slides also, like affluence leading to increase in meat consumption. So we've also seen in our data cuts that once the MHI increases from 50,000 to 100,000 plus, we also saw an increase in the penetration and consumption of meat products among the audience, which also correlates with the fact that affluence is one of the key factors in driving meat consumption. So when we look at, okay, these consumers are having meat almost regular basis. So when we try to understand how many times in a week are they consuming, so we have added all 4 meals in a day, which is breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner. So the early adopters are consuming meat for almost half of the meals in a week. So if they have 28 meals in a week, almost 14 of them have meat in them. So lunch and dinner are the key day parts with like highest frequency. But we also see consumption of meat during other occasions like breakfast and snack as well. And when we also look at this frequency of consumption, so out of the 14 times, which is the protein which is consumed the maximum amount of times, again, similar to penetration, poultry is the leader with almost about 3.5 times in a week, followed by fish, which has about 2.7 times in a week. And the next one is mutton. So beef also has a good frequency on a small set of audience. So dairy and eggs, which we've seen the higher penetration, so they are also pretty much consumed at least 4 to 5 times in a week. So when we look at what are the occasions for which the early adopters are consuming meat, so typically we've seen that in India, whenever people are consuming meat, there is something like a special occasion. Maybe it's a Sunday meal, or maybe there is some occasion at home, which is like somebody's birthday or like anniversary, or there is a family get together, there's a festival. But when we look at the early adopters, for them, the meat consumption has moved beyond these special occasions. They have it pretty much for their regular meals, which is their day-to-day menus. So the highest consumption happens during their normal meals, which is their weekday meals, followed by other occasions. So pretty much what this says is they are consuming meat for everything as a part of their day-to-day meals, and also as part of their special occasions, which could be celebrations or get-togethers, parties, festivals. So, and where do these consumers have meat? Do they only have it at home, or do they only have it out of home? So pretty much most of the majority of the consumers have these meat products both at home and out of home. So this is also an opportunity to create products that work well at home, and also create products that work well with the places of outside consumption, which could be QSRs, restaurants. So when we also particularly look at the out of home consumption, the numbers increase when we look at products like shellfish, beef, pork. So this could be for factors because maybe because of availability of some of these products, or maybe the religious beliefs where some people are not comfortable getting these things home, or like the difficulty in like cleaning some of these types of meat, especially shellfish, where a lot of consumers find it difficult to clean and cook at home. So some of these factors lead to the higher out of home consumption for these categories like shellfish, beef, and pork. So since the early adopters consume a lot of meat, which is almost like 14 times in a week, we've also asked them, would they be continuing similar kind of frequency going forward? So what's interesting is almost 1 in 4 of them are thinking of cutting down on the meat consumption going forward. So those numbers increase when we also look at meat types like beef and pork. But even for items like chicken and mutton and fish also, we saw that 1 in 4 early adopters are looking at reducing their consumption in the future. So what are some of the reasons why they are looking at cutting down the consumption of meat? So we can cluster them into 2 buckets. One is the product related barriers. So which is say people have concerns about hygiene of the meat procured, or like the smell, or the ease of like cooking, cleaning, or even sometimes the way you feel after you eat. So maybe feeling a little acidic, or like a little guilty, or like heavy. So all of these product related barriers, along with some of the emerging drivers, like where consumers are thinking about animal cruelty, consumers are thinking about sustainability. So with all these reasons put together, some of these consumers are thinking of cutting down their consumption going forward. So looking at this, I think these are some of the opportunity areas for plant-based products to be able to enter the consumer households, because we could be able to like work on products that can solve the product related barriers. Say hygiene is definitely assured in plant-based meats, and then definitely like developing products that are very easy and convenient to cook, and also products that are not heavy on stomach after consuming. So these are some of the product related barriers that we can keep in mind while developing products. And of course, the other barriers like animal cruelty and impact on planet are something that comes default with alternative proteins. So which makes it as some of the compelling reasons for consumers to try these products. So after understanding the consumer and their behavior, so now let's get into what are some of the cues for developing the products. So non-vegetarian food in India is not only like one food choice, but when you talk to the consumers, you see that it's a way of their life. So they talk so passionately about meat. So it's almost like it's one of their traditions. Like a lot of people talk about how their Sunday meal always included like meat while growing up, or like even today. So the smell of meat being cooked at home signifies that okay, it is Sunday. So in their own words, consumers feel that okay, just the smell of that mutton cooking makes them feel hungry. So it's a tradition or a ritual that happens like almost every week. And also it is pure indulgence. So when consumers talk about meat, they talk about like the moment they look at it, they feel like the mouth is watering, they feel hungry, or it's also very, very high on satiation. So even with a little quantity that they are eating, they feel that the craving is satisfied and then they're really feeling like happy, satisfied. And also it's a mark of celebrations and social currency. So typically what they say is like, okay, whenever non-veg is there at home, it's like there's a party happening. Or whenever we have guests at home, then there has to be like non-veg food. And then people try and make the occasions even more special by like making best in class dishes and then trying to figure out new recipes that they can cook and trying to make different varieties starting from appetizers to the center of the plate, biryanis or gravies. So there is a lot of emotions associated with consumption of non-veg. So therefore, when we are developing products, it's not just the product that we are developing, but the product has to meet all these emotional markers that meat satisfies for the consumers. So therefore, while developing products, some of the key pointers that we need to go through. One is like, what are the drivers of consumption for these products, or what are the need states during which people want to consume these products? And what are the formats that work well with these people? And once we start developing on a particular product, what are some of the sensory cues that consumers look for in meat, and therefore which we need to recreate in the plant-based meats? And also some insights on what is the kind of packaging that one should do and what are the kind of price points that one should look at. So looking at the drivers of consumption, so in India, non-veg consumption is all about taste and indulgence. So rest everything comes later. So even here, when we look at the drivers, so it is tasty is the primary driver. So most people consume meat for the taste and the indulgence that it offers. So when we are talking about taste, we are also talking about the kind of juiciness that the meat has, or the experience of eating with bone, or the entire aroma or smell that comes out while cooking. Also the experience after you eat, how is your like craving satisfied, or like how do you feel that you're like indulged, or like your craving is like satisfied. So it's totally driven by the taste and indulgence. So after taste and indulgence, the other factor that drives the consumption is convenience. So typically, like there are consumers saying, okay, when we make a particular vegetable, maybe some people in the house might like it and some people might not like it. But when we make meat, we know that everybody in the family likes it. So we don't need to like different dishes for different people. So everybody likes it. And also it's very easy to clean, cook and prepare. And the kind of versatility that meat offers. Like with similar one chicken, so there are so many things that the consumers can make. So therefore the entire variety that comes into picture. So this is also very, very important. So early adopters, as we've seen, since their frequency of consumption is very, very high, so they also consume meat for the requirement of like protein requirement and also for the health and nutrition. And lastly, while people don't talk about value for money or affordability at the top, but we do know that in a market like India, for us to like for the category to like go to reach masses and not even like to be part of the regular basket that one buys, pricing and affordability is like really, really important. So therefore, even for plant-based meats also, the drivers when we are looking at the products should be almost in a similar fashion. So taste and indulgence has to be the primary factor driving the product. So not health, not anything. It has to be, the product has to be tasty and the product has to meet the benchmark of taste when benchmarked with the traditional meat products. And it also has to offer that kind of like variety, versatility, ease of cooking, ease of convenience. And it also has to match up to the nutrition content that the traditional meat has. So like when we look at variety and versatility, which is one of the big considerations for meat consumption. So when we look at the traditional formats, so people talk about like different types of meat offering variety. So ranging from chicken to mutton to seafood and everything. Or even within a particular type of meat also, like in chicken, people also experiment with like broilers versus country. Or within seafood, there is like so much variety that is available in terms of like fresh water versus sea water. And again, within exotic meats, there is like a lot of like items like ducks, lobsters, crabs. So people think of a lot of variety when they think of meat. And also people think of a lot of formats. So right from your traditional dishes, which are your say rice or like something related to like curry or a gravy, there are items like kebabs, keema, tikka, sandwiches. There's so much that can be done, and there is so much that can be done. Like you can start the meal with like say something an appetizer, or like from right from the sides to the center of the plate. There's so much that one can do with meat. And also like in terms of cuisines, like consumers experiment a lot with meat in terms of like different types of not only Indian cuisine, but also like Chinese or like even Mexican, Italian. So a lot of recipes that one tries with different kinds of meat. And within Indian also consumers have like a lot of options where they experiment right from like Punjabi, South Indian, Goan, Konkan, etc. And also like with different kind of spice combinations. So while developing products in the plant-based space also, we will have to think through all these permutations and combinations, like different kinds of like meat. Okay, are we able to replicate similar taste profile as a freshwater versus like say a seawater? Or are we able to like are the products compatible with different kinds of masalas or different kinds of cuisines? Or like are we able to create a variety that satisfies the sides to the center of the plate and all those different combinations that can go with different accompaniments? So along with variety, the other things that consumers talk about is also health and nutrition benefits. So while most people are not exactly clued about how much protein requirement is there per day, and therefore like they don't plan meals accordingly, but at the same time they also consider non-veg as a good source of protein and other benefits. Say like most people say it's high source of protein. Therefore, it's very important for children and adults, everybody who's health conscious to eat meat. And especially like proteins like fish, where they say it's high in omega-3, which is good for like people's hair, skin, health, everything. And also some of the things in non-veg, which especially the bones, are considered as an excellent source of calcium. So a lot of people spoke about how paya soup is given to most people who've gone through a fracture or like some bone related ailments. And also they consider it as a good source of iron, vitamin D. And some of the people also consider non-veg food as something which is immunity boosting. So therefore, health is also an important consideration for plant-based products as well. So it's important to try and recreate similar nutritional profiles as of the traditional meat. So when we look at different, so now we've seen the need states, like why do consumers have these things, which is have the non-veg products, which is taste, convenience, variety, health. So now looking at the actual products. So when we look at chicken, so I think recreating chicken is going to be the toughest task because this is a protein which is very high on taste, also on price, convenience, versatility, and health. So consumers rate chicken high on everything that they expect from a product, right from taste to health to, and the affordability is one definitely an advantage. So for most of the consumers, when they say non-veg, by default it is chicken. Also, they also talk about how a simple chicken can transform from maybe a day-to-day chicken curry that they make to something indulgent or like something luxurious that they serve during parties, like including the butter chickens or some of the appetizers that they make. So the plant-based chicken when we are making, so it also has to meet up to all these benchmarks that consumers have on traditional chicken. So therefore, it has to meet up to the taste, price, convenience, and health parameters of the traditional chicken products. So when we look at mutton, so while the users of mutton swear by the indulgence and the taste and the deliciousness of the meat, so mutton is also like a lot of people talk about it being an acquired taste. So that along with the expensiveness also makes it a little limited, makes the reach a little limited. So also it has other things like it takes a lot of time to cook, and then a lot of some of the consumers also feel that it is difficult to digest, therefore it's not suitable for everyone. So with mutton, we have some of these like product related barriers which can act as advantages when we try and create the plant-based options. Specifically, like if we can tackle the expensive part and also the ease of like cooking and also like being light on the stomach. So with fish, definitely people do not rate fish's taste as high as mutton and chicken. But the core thing that is driving fish is in terms of the health aspect. It's considered to be the most healthier protein. And it is also something while people have a little bit of complaints in terms of like cleaning it, but at the same time, it offers a lot of convenience in terms of cooking. Most people say that you can cook fish within like 10 minutes once it is clean. And also, while you cannot make a lot of dishes, different types of dishes with fish, but versatility is in the variety, which is right from a lot of variety available in like freshwater versus seawater. So some of the barriers of consumption that we are seeing for traditional meat, which can act or like which can help the plant-based meat as an entry barrier, as an easy low-hanging fruit. So typically the process related barriers. So like mutton, like we've discussed, low on the ease of cooking, taking time to cook, and also like a lot of people think procuring mutton is also not easy. It does come with experience. They say it's not easy for anybody to walk up to the store and just pick the mutton. You need to have certain experience in picking the right quality of mutton. And also while cooking, it needs patience and experience, and it's not as easy as cooking a chicken. So therefore, some of this, and especially when we look at keema and all, so it's even more tedious because people think the cleaning is like takes a lot of time and it's also like stressful because it has a lot of blood that is there which needs to be cleaned. So it is entirely the experience of like procuring it and cleaning is distressing. And so therefore some of these process related barriers are something that the plant-based meats can easily tackle, and then therefore like find as like as a differentiated offerings. And also when it comes to fish, everybody knows that there are certain months in the year where consumers are not it's not available in the market because of the breeding season. So therefore, the plant-based fish also can plug in those gaps where it is available through the year, and then also offer like good quality meat through the year. And also some of the other things that can be considered are like too many antibiotics. Nowadays, a lot of consumers are worried about the environment in which these things are grown, which has highly which has a lot of hormones and antibiotics, which is something that plant-based space can address. And also some of the other things like, okay, once I have that I'm feeling a little heavy or a little acidic. If any of these things can be like tackled with the category, I think those will act as a plus points for the consumers. So now moving on to the formats. So when we asked consumers, now that you have a variety of meats that are available, so which are the formats that you would be like most keen on trying when they are like recreated using the plant-based methods? So definitely poultry and mutton have seen higher appeal compared to the other products. So I think these could be the low-hanging fruits. The plant-based space can first try and create products in the space of poultry and mutton, which will be like widely accepted by consumers. And also in terms of formats, so in the market, even in traditional meat markets, while fresh still dominates with almost like 70% of occasions where consumers buy fresh meat, but consumers nowadays are also experimenting a lot with marinated products, frozen products, chilled products. So that's some of those formats which would be easy for plant-based meats to start with. So maybe the frozen formats is something that one can start with and then maybe slowly move to the chilled formats. So even in traditional formats from online meat retail, we know that the ready-to-cook formats are like accounting for almost 20% of their sales. And in terms of cuts, we all know the love India has for eating meat with bone. So we can see that leg pieces are something that is like most commonly used by consumers. So leg pieces, wings, ribs, and other breast and curry cuts. So these are some of the cuts that are mostly bought. So therefore, we can start working on some of these things as a initial starting point. So in terms of format, what we've seen in the advanced markets like US is also to create formats that are like familiar to the consumers, rather than trying to create an entirely new dish with a new product that consumers are not familiar. But if we can try and recreate plant-based meats in the formats that consumers are familiar with or consumers associate with, it will be easy to induce trials. So in the QSR in the US, mostly people have tried their most popular or hero products like their iconic burgers or like nuggets, and they've recreated those products with the plant-based options. But it's not that easy for Indian market compared to the US market, because typically where like their main meal is almost like 3 burgers 3 times a week. But when we look at a market like India, we have like multiple national dishes and the recipes change from like state to state. So therefore, there's a lot of opportunity to innovate across day parts and across like different formats. So some of the things that we found out, some of the most popular formats that can be recreated. So starting from, I think biryani is the most popular dish in India. So with Swiggy and Zomato saying almost like one biryani is ordered every second. So biryanis and the gravies that one makes with different kinds of meat like chicken curry, mutton curry. So those are the two most popular dishes that India eats. So along with them, there's a lot of opportunity in terms of like different sites like lollipops, tikkas, or momos, different kinds of fries. So there's a lot of variety that one can experiment with. So also what we know from the consumer work that we've done is also consumers are more willing to experiment through snacking if the category is new, because they do not want to risk their main meal. So that's why we are also seeing most of the products that are getting launched in the Indian market are like in the snacking space to start with. So these are some of the popular chicken dishes one can experiment with, right from the center of the plate to some of the sides. And in terms of mutton, it doesn't have as much versatility as chicken has. So which is mostly like restricted to the rice items like biryani and curries. But kebabs is something that consumers think it is difficult to make at home, and therefore they prefer buying from outside or eating outside. So kebabs could be one of the like low-hanging fruit for plant-based mutton manufacturers. So in terms of fish, the versatility is even less, where most of the people saying there can only be a curry or like a fry that can be made with fish. However, the versatility, as we've discussed earlier, is in the variety. So people have mentioned a lot of varieties of fish in fresh water, right from rohu, betki, katla, etc. And also in sea fish, pomfret, salmon, banga. So people, depending on their taste preference or the occasion, they keep experimenting with different kinds of fish. So while during product development, it's important to take these different kinds of cues from different varieties that are available and recreate them. So this is again, like we've seen, so if you look at the current market, so we see that 50% of the SKUs that are available in the market right now are in the plant-based chicken space. And there is another 28% which is called meat. So they've not differentiated in terms of whether it is mutton or chicken or something. They're called plant-based meat. And there's also 17% of the SKUs which are in the mutton lamb space, which is similar to what we've seen, that there is more acceptance to chicken and mutton at this point of time. But there is a lot of opportunity for plant-based seafood, because right now we're not seeing like many SKUs in the market. Also, as we've seen the kind of formats that are available in the market, so we are seeing innovation right from center of the plate to snacks. But what we can see is like a lot of variety, a lot of SKUs are operating in the space of kebabs, tikkas, nuggets, burger patties, sausages, samosas. We are also seeing some of them center of the plate, which is like keema and some of the rolls, parathas, etc. So quickly looking at some of the sensory cues that consumers look at while looking at the non-vegetarian products. So while we've discussed earlier, taste indulgence is the most important factor for non-veg. But when consumers talk about taste, they're just not talking about taste. They're talking about the entire sensorial journey, which is right from the smell of meat being cooked, or the color of the meat, or the color of the end product, like the curry or the kebab once it is made, or there's like a layer of oil that is floating on the chicken, or the juiciness of the meat, or the experience of eating with the bone, and the satiation that comes even with little quantity. So consumers are particular about all these aspects in the sensorial journey. So therefore, the products that are developed also will have to like ensure that the entire sensorial journey is being recreated, and but not just the taste. So some of the sensory cues that we know for chicken are consumers expect the hand feel of the chicken to be soft and tender, and the color has to be typically light pink. If it is red, consumers consider the meat to be stale, and if it is white, it is considered to have like too much of fat. And the meat should cook easily and immediately. It should not take a lot of time. And once it is cooked, it should be firm and juicy. So it should not disintegrate into pieces. And if, especially if they are making a curry, there should be a layer of oil on it. And also whatever products that we are making, so we can experiment with different spices and different spice combinations. So in terms of mutton, so consumers are very particular about the age of the animal. So a lot of people have mentioned when they go to the store, they check with the butcher in terms of like what's the kind of the age of the animal. And as per them, typically the taste, texture, and everything is good if the animal is young, typically like less than 2 years old. So therefore, I think the meat taste texture that we are recreating for plant-based also has to be benchmarked against an animal which is like less than 2 years old. And again, eating with bone is very, very important. And other sensory cues are typically the mutton has to be in dark pink or red color, unlike chicken where it is like light pink. So again, I think the color white is considered stale or like too much fat. So if consumers are looking at keema products, then it should be dark red in color. So definitely should not look in white color. And the meat should be more juicy and less hard. So again, there should be a layer of oil on it. And especially for the products that are getting made with mutton, they should be spicy. So non-spicy is typically considered not tasty when it comes to mutton products. So fish, looking at fish. So texture and consistency is very important when it comes to fish. So the texture should be firm. And consumers also claim that the meat thickness also varies depending on the freshwater and seawater. The seawater fish is supposed to be like to have thicker meat compared to the freshwater. And the color of the meat should be pink. And the meat should not be smelling too much, because too much smell is associated with being stale. And after cooking, the meat is expected to retain its shape. It should not fall into pieces, because if it does, then it is not considered fresh. And there should be some bones, not like a lot of them, but they should be easy to remove. And at any point of time, the meat should not be chewy. So some of the other considerations along with the sensory cues that one has to keep in mind is, since the plant-based space is new, and then also consumers' perception in their head is, since we are like, how are we recreating meat using plant-based ingredient or like in the lab? So there are a lot of doubts that are associated with saying maybe it has a lot of chemicals, maybe it has a lot of preservatives or artificial ingredients, which are, or maybe they are highly processed, and therefore apprehensions in terms of like trying those products. So it is important for us to also to aim at creating the products with less preservatives, less chemicals, and also like try to have the labels as clean as possible to be able to convince the consumers. So some of the feedback that we've seen for the products in the US typically is in the spaces of moisture, flavor, and texture. So the meat being too dry, like not having like enough juiciness, or the flavors being too strong, like very strong soy taste or like soy smell, or the textures being like too mushy or like too compact. So these are some of the insights that we've got from the US market, so which we are assuming also holds true for the Indian market. So some of these things are something that one needs to check before rolling those products out. Also, especially when we are developing products for QSRs, so it's also important to ensure that we are not taking them products which are totally different to what is already being served in the restaurant. So QSRs won't be, or like any restaurants at this stage, they would not be willing to invest in new equipment or like reinvent the entire process of cooking for plant-based meat. So therefore, the SKUs that we are developing have to be versatile. So with this one SKU, they should be able to create multiple dishes, and the preparation procedures should be similar to conventional procedures, like how they cook the conventional meat items. And also, all of this needs to be done with the existing equipment. So we cannot expect them to invest in terms of new equipment to create these products or like to cook these products in the restaurants. So in terms of packaging, so what we know is on an average in a family size of 4 to 5, typically 1 to 1.2, 1.3 kilos is what the consumers consume for one occasion. So it is therefore the pack sizes that one gets into has to keep that consumption occasion in mind. And also now that we know that most consumers would not be experimenting with a pack which is as big as a kilo or like a 1 kilo plus SKUs, because they are not sure what they are looking at. And so the trial packs has to be smaller in size. So when we look at most of the SKUs that are already present in the market, we see that most of them are operating in the range of 200 grams to 300 grams, which will enable like good trials, and then maybe like consumers can keep adding to it, or like once a product takes off, then we can keep adding the higher size SKUs. So also in terms of packaging, what we know from the studies that we've done in the plant-based dairy space, since these are the new categories, consumers tend to check the entire pack. They read both the front of the pack and back of the pack. And what is it that they notice on the pack for the categories that they are familiar with? Maybe typically they check what's the expiry date, what's the pricing, or is there any discount or like offers that are there. But categories like plant-based milk, dairy, which are new to the consumers, so the consumers are reading the entire information that is put in terms of like what are the ingredients that are going into it, what's the kind of nutrition that is there on it, along with the other things. Also, they're checking the protein content. So it is important when we are creating the packaging, so to provide the information that is relevant to the consumers and also use the right terminology. Say like plant-based, the term plant-based is far more familiar to consumers, and also it attracts broader audience compared to terms like vegan or like any other terms. Also, since they check the nutrition content, and also it is important for us to ensure that the nutrition, or like be it the protein content or be it the other things which are like match up to the traditional meat items. Also, since some of the other benefits of this category is also into the sustainable space, it's also advisable to look at packaging which is also sustainable. So looking at the pricing, So what we know, we all know the pricing that the typical meat products have, the traditional meat products. So consumer on an average pays anywhere from around like 350 rupees for chicken to 660 rupees for mutton, or like about 530 for fish. So this is what they pay for around 1.1 to 1.2 kilos. So while some of these like chicken is very, very affordable right now, but for us to make these products a regular consumption in the consumer's household, we'll need to achieve price parity sooner than later. But right now, when we look at the price of the SKUs that are in the market, so typically chicken is almost at a price premium of like 3x to 4x compared to the traditional chicken products. While mutton, it is a little easier to achieve price parity, where we are seeing a premium of about 30% to 50%. And beef, I think we should just, it is skewed by the imported SKUs of Beyond Meat. But otherwise, this price premium, especially for chicken, which is like really, really high compared to the traditional chicken, is something that needs to be worked on to be able to convert people from trials into regular consumption. So these are some of the examples in terms of what's available in the market in terms of the price points compared to the traditional price points. Say when we look at nuggets as an item, so most of them are in the range of like for a 250 grams, the price point is around 295. However, when we look at the chicken nuggets, the traditional chicken nuggets, in the similar price, you are getting almost like double the quantity. The 500-gram pack of chicken nuggets is about 275 rupees. Or ITC's chicken nuggets, which is a 1 kilo pack, is about 396 rupees. And similarly, when we look at like mutton seekh kebabs, so the pricing is again much higher. For a 300-gram SKU, it's around 450 rupees. However, a traditional mutton seekh kebab for a 500 grams, the pricing is around 554. So once we have the product that is developed, so it is equally important for us to test and learn before we launch in the market. Because typically any new category or any new product can generate the curiosity and then can lead to trials. But if the product performance is not up to the market, the repeat purchases won't be happening. So therefore, it is important to test the product with consumers before rolling out, so that we are reducing the entire risk, and also it helps in better decision making. So in the initial stages, I think doing a blind product test with the benchmarked conventional meat product is a good idea, so that we understand how this product is preparing in terms of like taste, texture, juiciness, and other parameters. And also, rather than getting into multiple markets, maybe just getting into a one market where we do the pilot, where we understand the product performance before getting into a nationwide rollout or before getting into multiple cities is a good idea, because then it gives us some predictability when we are getting into the bigger scale. So some of the parameters that one has to evaluate when you're doing a product test are, again, in the space of like, it has to meet up to the benchmark products in terms of taste, versatility, ease of cleaning, cooking, health parameters, aspiration, affordability. So aspiration is also a very, very important aspect for plant-based meat. Without the aspiration, consumers would not be moving from the traditional meat items into the plant-based categories. So these are all some of the items where we have to achieve parity with the traditional meat items. So once all of this is done and the product is launched, so that is not the end of it. So once the product is in the market, there are like a lot of things that can still happen with the product. So maybe after a couple of years, there could be different developments in technology, or there could be like new claims that are like gaining importance in terms of maybe consumers are looking at different claims like, okay, what is like rich in fiber, or what is rich in like say some of the vitamins. So one has to continuously keep working on the product to be able to update it with the new technology, and also with the new claims or with the new trends that consumers are looking at. Also, as we all know, as a manufacturer, everybody has pressures on cost. So therefore, it is important also to rationalize the products in the portfolio, say if I have 10 items in my portfolio, so we all know that after a few months in the market, we know there will be only a few SKUs that will be like doing really well, and the other SKUs are not doing as well as we expected them to be. So therefore, it is important to optimize the SKUs that are not doing well and also leverage and grow the SKUs that are doing well. Also within the product, also it's important to rework on the ingredients or like look at something which can give you the flexibility with the cost, but at the same time without compromising on the taste, so that we can work on the cost pressures. And the last thing is also like always benchmarking with the competition. So we already know that there are a lot of products and brands that are available in the last 2 years in Indian market, and then that's only going to increase. So therefore, it is important to check the consumer likability of our products vis-a-vis competition, because at the end of the day, they're all going to fight for the similar consumer and then the same market share. So that's all we have today. So if there are any questions, we should be open to that.
Thank you for the insightful session, Raji. And there are over now 200 plus SKUs on the Indian market across plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy. And most of these have launched in the last year. So it's really critical to have product differentiation. And that was the one of the main reasons why we had this webinar. And we'll move on to the Q&A section shortly. I'll just want to inform you guys that we have a post-event survey for you to fill out so that we can take your feedback and improve our programming and the kinds of events that you guys want us to put out, so that we can actually help make this community a lot better. So the first question that's there in the chat is that what was the sample size being used for this study? And let me preface that by saying that the materials that these product rollout guides have include 2 of our studies, so a qualitative research as well as a quantitative research on plant-based meat. So Raji, can you talk a little bit more about the sample size for the studies? Raji, I think you're on mute.
So when we've done the studies, so we've looked at the sample size of almost 500 for the quantitative studies. So which is almost like very like robust in terms of so in the qualitative study, we've looked at about 550 sample size, and in terms of quantitative study, we've looked at around 500 sample size.
So the next question on the chat is that what are the concerns and impressions that consumers have with respect to plant-based meat, both negative and positive? So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
So in terms of positives, like we've seen, so a lot of people are looking at, like especially the early adopters, like we've seen, they are looking at reducing the consumption of conventional meat going forward, because they are using it, they are consuming the meat at a very high frequency. So therefore, they are looking at reducing the consumption going forward. So that's when the plant-based meat comes in, and then it offers them similar kind of like taste, indulgence, and experience. And then in terms of negatives, so like we've seen, a lot of consumers are apprehensive about maybe these products are like very highly processed, and then maybe these products are have artificial ingredients or chemicals or like a lot of like ingredients into it. So therefore, they're not really sure how can anybody like recreate meat with plant-based ingredients. So that's something that is a negative that consumers are saying right now.
And the next question is about any data available in terms of plant-based meat and dairy products, sale data for India. And I think one of our moderators would actually like to answer this question. Dive.
San, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Oh yeah, okay. So Raji, you can go ahead.
Sure. So we do not have the exact sale numbers for meat and dairy, but what we have is also like some of the current market data and also the potential by 2030 from some of the work that we've done with Deloitte. So we'll be happy to share that. And also what we have is some of the like what are the products that are currently available in the market and all of that, which will also act as like a little bit of surrogate, but not exactly like a sale by each one of those SKUs or like by each one of those categories. But some data in terms of like what could be the size that was there in 2021 and this thing. But this is definitely like the projection that we've had or the market estimate. So we'll be publishing that very soon on our website. So we'll be able to share that once we have.
Yeah, and one additional question about the demographics of the study and sample size was, did the study also cover tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
We did not definitely go to the tier 3 studies, but tier 3 cities, sorry, but we did go to the tier 1, not even tier 2. We went to the 4 million plus cities and also the tier 1 cities. Because right now we don't see the category or like many manufacturers getting into the tier 2 and tier 3 in terms of distribution.
Yeah, there have been some sources of activity in multiple Indian cities now. So like I think in our subsequent studies, we'll definitely be including more of a focus on like not only the largest metros, but also the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And one other question was, about more about, I guess, regulatory guidelines and direction. And I think, this particular session would not be the best one, but I think we just conducted a session on vegan foods regulation very recently, and that will, be able to better answer your questions on the regulatory front. And I think, so there's one other question about, ingredients. So among the studies, other than soy, did we see any other major ingredients being used in making of plant-based meat?
Ingredients, right? So we've not done, so from a market perspective, what we are seeing is mostly the soy, because we try to compile the number of products that are in the market. But along with soy, we're also seeing, I think, some of the products which are made with like peas, mung beans, and chickpeas. But at this point of time, we don't have data which clearly tells us like how many products are made with soy or how many products are made with peas or like mung bean. So maybe our SciTech or innovation team might be able to answer that better.
Yeah, and at least the product mix that we've seen in dairy, yes, there's a lot more variety in terms of the raw material going in. But with plant-based meat products, even globally, majority happen to be soy. There are a few, now pea protein options coming onto the market, but specifically, it's definitely dominated by soy. And I think one of the last questions is about any learnings about people who try plant-based foods but also don't continue to consume. And Simon, I can answer this. We are actually going to be conducting a study on repeat purchases and basically purchase lapsing, because as you know, the the market has really just grown in the last 1 year. So now that there are products on the market, we are definitely going to be, figuring out, consumers' purchase behavior. That's one of our priorities. And I think just as a final question, because I don't want to leave any unanswered questions here, but were fermentation-based products part of the study? And the answer to that was no, because really there are none which are particularly fermentation derived right now on the Indian market. And globally also, you're only seeing fermentation derived products in the US market. Yeah. I think that would be all for our Q&A section. So thanks a lot for attending, everyone, and it was a great session. Thank you, Raji. Also, just wanted to ask you guys to watch out for your inboxes for the product rollout guides. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.